Hello everyone and welcome back to another devlog on my multiplayer wizard game where you and friends join together using a variety of crazy spells to clear dungeons and cause chaos. In today's devlog I'm going to be talking to you about a system I've been overhauling, which is the spell system. It's a system that's been needed to be reworked for a little while now, and I've spent the past few weeks reworking it and getting the basics of a brand new spell system set up. So now it's time to show you the progress. But you might be wondering, why am I redoing the spell system? Well, the old system has a few issues in it which have made creating spells quite a pain, which for a game like this, where I'm planning to have like a whole variety of different spells, making it easy to recreate spells and make brand new ones is super important. And currently I've had to make quite a few different scripts that more or less all do the same behaviour, but were still a pain to make. And they all do use inheritance, like there's always a base spell that they all kind of derive from, but there wasn't a good way to override things. Components didn't always work, like the attacking spells didn't always feel as good, the push and pull spells definitely didn't always work, and I just wasn't a huge fan of how it was all set up. It felt kind of messy. So I had an idea for a new system. This is going to be a system where I make a spell that consists of different components which actually make up the spell itself, and the components in this case were going to be scriptable objects. The scriptable objects were able to handle things like visuals, movement, collision, damage, and if they're a support type spell. Damage and support kind of go hand in hand. That's more or less like the overarching type of the spell. And to make a new spell, all I really need is a new scriptable object, and I can just slot it in. But I don't want a system where I have to create 10 different scriptable objects that are all doing different amounts of damage, like a damage component that does 10 damage, a damage component that does 20 damage, because more or less it's the same thing. So that's why I came up with an override system where I can take a scriptable object and override some of the variables in it. So there are the overrides, which is something I'm still working on for the whole system, and it definitely needs some more polish and fleshing out. The basic idea is I can override any component that I want, and the current way I do it is by saying, okay, what is the variable you want to override, but you have to put a string in, and then it can either be a float or a bool that we can override, and that's very limiting and very error prone, because if I mistype the variable or I had a space in by accident I don't notice, well then it won't override. So it's something I'm looking for and looking into making a better system. And the float and the bool is also something I don't always want to do, because if I have a VFX component, I'd ideally in the future just like to be able to pass a game object in and say this is the prefab that the VFX component will be, and you're overriding with this, rather than having to make 100 like different VFX components that all have different prefabs. I'd rather just say override it with this. This is how it should look. I plan on doing this change to the override system like as quickly as I can, honestly, because it's such a major thing of it, and I think it'll make making spells even easier than it is now. But in the end, what this will mean is rather than having 10 different scriptable objects that all do damage to different values, I could have one scriptable object that does damage, and then I just make overrides which do 10 different values, which will save me a lot of time. The whole system does need more testing to make sure it actually works as I imagine it should. But my basic idea of overhauling the system is going to be to use a custom inspector kind of setup for it to make overriding them a lot easier, so you can like have a drop down of variables to override with. It's just how to actually pick what to override is what I'm currently thinking about. If you have any ideas of how to do that, please let me know down in the comments below. So creating spells, I've talked about how easy it is to make them now, so I thought I'd talk about that a bit more as well. What I've currently done is any spells I had before in the previous version of the system, I've completely recreated. So before I had a fireball, a large fireball, and a charged fireball, and push, pull, and a shield spell. And what I've basically done is recreated all of them except for the large fireball, because what's the point? What I've done this time is I've made a damage over time fireball. And damage over time works in quite a fun way. Basically what it does is it does an initial bit of damage if I want it to, and then over however many seconds it will just do X amount of damage. And I can choose how much interval in between doing damage, how long it should do the damage for, and it works really well. But with the system, let's say I wanted a fire spell that not only does damage but also pulls people towards you. Well, can I do that? The answer, which would be really disappointing if it wasn't, is yes, I absolutely can. In fact, rather than me just tell you that I can do that, why don't I show you how I can do this and how easy it is to do. As you can see here, I've got Unity open. And what I'm going to show you first of all is the spells that we've got. So if I go to prefab spells, and we've got these fire spells. We've got Fireball, has these spells, it has these components, Fire Charge, which is the charge up one, and it has a chargeable component added to it, which is a 3-stage charging component, which means you can charge it 3 times. Again, that's another thing I could override if I wanted to. And we have damage over time, which has its own VFX as well.
Let's say I want to make a fireball which also pushes people as well. So what I could do is add either a pushing component to this, or for simplicity's sake, what I'm going to do is do fireball, duplicate that, and we'll call it fireball push. And then all I need to add to that is add a new component, and we go to our nice scriptable components here, or I can just select one down there and add a push force. And that's pretty much it. As long as the player actually knows that the spell exists, which it can do very simply with a nice boom. Here we have Unity the play scene. You can just about see the play there, but it's easier to look at the scene view here. You can see the scene view here. We got Golem there, me there. If we go to the player networking, one in the scene, fireball push. So if I press 1 now, I think this is actually kind of important to notice. I had an error there because I made my own mistake, and it kind of shows that the system's still new and needs some changes. All the spell components have the spell component type in order of use. Order of use does nothing, so I'm going to get rid of that. Setup just refers to if I've overridden the component. Again, I could probably make that hidden, it doesn't need to be public. And then there's the type. Type's really important, and I sometimes forget to set the right type. Push force is a type of spell, which could probably need a better name, because type component type doesn't really make much sense. So this could probably do it for a better name, which I'll be thinking of. But what happened then was the spell didn't work because it was using the push component, but it thought it was a collision, so it didn't really know what to do. But now, if I press 1 and I fire the fireball, this is a fireball with a push. And you can see it pushed. Like, it doesn't have to do that. If I really wanted to, I could go back here, make it a pull 1. The name isn't right anymore, but we'll ignore that because it's going to remain a push. Press 1. And it pulls it. And that's how easy it is to remake spells if I wanted to. If I want this to be like a water ball instead, all I need to do is change the VFX to a blue color and I've made a water ball. And I admit, a fireball push spell is just fireball with knockback. It's not that exciting, but I hope you understand how customizable this system is and how easy it will be for me to make spells in the future, and how many different spells I could make just with this. So what's next? Well, I actually need to finish up the spell overhaul itself, which includes, doing things such as sorting out the custom inspector, which I'm hoping will also allow me to finish off overriding, because I think the two kind of go hand in hand, or they might go hand in hand. But the custom inspector is one of the main things that I think will make the whole system come together and feel a lot nicer and just more fun to use, really, and also make it look kind of pretty. There's also some more polishing that I need to do to components, because some components have variables they don't need or use, or they're a bit of an unnecessary component, or they have unnecessary functionality. So I'm going to go through them, polish them, add any extra bits I need, and make them more to a finalized state. The system, I can imagine going over quite a few iterations. For an initial first pass at an spell overhaul system, I think this is a pretty good system, honestly. I'm really proud of where it's come from. Then what I need to do, which is kind of important for a multiplayer game, is I need to reset up networking for the new spells. It might already work with you changing your variable names. I don't think they will. I don't think I'm that lucky. But I do need to set it up, because for a multiplayer game, yeah, having spells that work over the network is rather important. And then the final thing I need to do, which honestly makes a lot of sense, is I actually need to make some spells. I asked you quite a few videos ago, and maybe even the last video, what spells do you want to see, and I've written them all down. Now it's kind of time to actually make them and make functionality for it all. I mean, some spells that people suggested are like ice damage, which is the same as a fireball, it just looks visually different, but some are entirely different, like Ice War, which spawns an object and stuff, which I could do. I just need to write, the extra functionality for it. And I think it's all going to be quite easy and doable, to be honest. And once again, if you have any spell ideas, feel free to comment down below. Now for my personal life, there's not too much, which makes me sound really sad, but it's not. A few weeks ago I went to Edinburgh, which is a really lovely city, and I've never been there before, or to Scotland before, to my knowledge, and that was a really nice time. It was a nice little break, and I said it before, it's a really beautiful city, and there was a lot of good sights that I saw. And there's also been runs. I mentioned, I think in the last devlog that I've been going for runs, and I've been carrying on with that. By the time I'm recording this, I'm actually a week away from doing my first park run, which is like a 5k run around a park, so I'm really looking forward to that. Running's been a really good way to just let off some steam, I almost want to say, but it's not. It's more like to have a nice reset in the morning. I do that and I feel pretty good for the rest of the day, which I never used to when running, so it's quite a nice development. You should join Discord as well if you want to get more wizard game updates, because that's kind of where I'm posting some. There's a special role for whiz kids who want to know more before everyone else, and I do minor updates with that role. Thank you very much for joining me in this devlog. I feel like this was a good bit of content to show you all, and I hope you are excited by what you see for the spell system, and I'm really looking forward to developing it further. If you have any ideas which you think could take the spell system one step further than it already is, or anything you would tweak or change, feel free to let me know. I'd be interested to hear your ideas and thoughts for it. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye.